Good evening, everyone. We all remember our favorite teachers, don't we? The ones who told our parents we'd be a fine student if only we didn't talk so much in class. Or maybe that was just me. The teachers who taught us about critical thinking and made learning fun. And of course, the teachers who convinced us we could make all of our dreams come true, no matter our circumstances. The truth is, teachers mean everything to us, and their influence lasts a lifetime. That's why I was so excited when the Charlotte Observer staff suggested we convene a panel of educators to help parents, students, and other educators as well better understand the unique circumstances many teachers face today. My name is Raina Cash, and I'm the executive editor of the Charlotte Observer. Tonight, we're pleased to present this forum to you. It is my hope that you'll find it informative and perhaps inspiring. Thank you in advance for your continued support of the Charlotte Observer and the important journalism we bring to thousands of readers every day in our region. Of course, that includes the work of journalists like Ana Maria Della Costa, who covers education with integrity, resolve, and passion, and will moderate tonight's panel. Now I'd like to introduce you to Lisa Vernon Sparks, one of the newest members of the Observer's leadership team, joining us as the Race, Culture, and Community Engagement Editor. And again, thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Raina. Yes, I joined the Charlotte Observer in July, and welcome to our forum tonight. How do we keep our teachers? It's a live discussion with local educators sharing their experiences and challenges as they settle into the school year. With the pandemic and related challenges in schools like masks, COVID vaccinations, and remote learning now starting to fade, teachers and districts are shifting their attention to another dilemma: short staffing. During this past year, public school teachers have been leaving the profession in record numbers. There are 300,000 vacancies across the country since August, with 342 of them in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools to date. As many as 2,100 teachers have resigned or retired from CMS since last year, with another 50 or so expected to resign by the end of the school year. Frustrated teachers are resigning for a host of reasons. They're tired of long hours and low pay. Some are changing careers. Gun violence is happening more often, raising real questions about the future of school safety. And in districts, how subjects are being taught, even what topics, such as Black history and social studies, science, even math, now are under intense scrutiny. Lesson plans or materials usually are a teacher's purview, but even now, certain books are being questioned or banned. School districts desperately seek to fill these vacancies, and they're looking towards other professionals, former military, for example. And since the pandemic, the demand for teachers to go above and beyond their job descriptions has really increased. Teachers are expected to serve as social workers or mental health counselors. But where's the support for them? So to discuss some of these issues and more, we have invited 3 educators, including Leslie Nilsson, an 11-year veteran with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, Ray Legrand, who is a fine arts teacher, also with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools since 2013, and Malcolm Butler, who's the professor and the dean of Cato College of Education at UNC Charlotte. We'll give each an opportunity to respond to questions being posed by Ana Maria Della Costa, and later in the program, we will share questions submitted from readers or those who are submitting online. And with that, I will toss it over to Ana Maria.
Thank you, Lisa and Raina. It's a pleasure for me to be here tonight. Like they said, I am the education reporter at the Charlotte Observer. I think it's interesting and also fitting that we're doing this discussion this week. It's American Education Week. where one of the things we can do is thank our educators and staff for the jobs that you do. So I want, on behalf of myself and the Observer, I want to say thank you to our panelists and all of the educators out there who do this every day. So thank you. I want to start off with letting our panelists introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Leslie. If you could just briefly share your background in education and why you got into this field. And this is a three-part question. And what kinds of things have changed for you in the last few years?
So teaching is my second career. I was a career restaurant manager, but the teaching just never left my heart. And so in the middle of my career, I decided to switch and go to graduate school, get my degree in education, and start off teaching in Massachusetts the year of the recession, which landed me in Charlotte because I could not find a job in Massachusetts. So I wound up down here, and it was certainly a big adjustment from Massachusetts, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. So I'm glad I'm down here. But what I've seen over my tenure here in Charlotte is a massive shift from they just keep adding to our buckets. So every year you feel like you're never get to just kind of like, I think I got this, because there's more and more being added to us every single year. So you just never feel like you've got a handle on your job. You never feel going home feeling like, oh, I can just relax. No, it's always something more you got to get done. And of course, it's about the students, but the pressures, especially in light of the pandemic that are coming down on top of us, just keep coming. Did I get all three of your points?
You did. I'm impressed. So thank you. And now we'll go to Ray. Welcome. And if you could just give us a quick or a brief background of your education background and what changes, why did you choose the profession and what changes have you seen?
Sure. So I actually came back. I am a CMS graduate. I graduated from West Charlotte High School, and I went away to college, went away to grad school, and then came back and started teaching at CPCC as an adjunct instructor in the fine arts. And I really love the interaction with students, and I love the relationship building with my students, and I love sharing my love of art. I actually started at CMS because there was a job opening at Piedmont Middle School, which was my middle school, and I had such fond feelings towards CMS, towards my experience, my educational experience in middle school and high school, that I started applying for jobs in CMS. So I was an untraditional path into education. But what brought me here was my love of CMS and my fantastic experiences with education. So I actually started at Olympic and am still at Olympic 10 years later. Changes I've seen have been drastic since I got here 10 years ago. I remember being startled by the lack of supplies and materials, even for cleaning, in my classroom when I first started. And I yearn for those days now. Those 10 years ago, we had a fully staffed building. Even though we were lacking in supplies, we weren't lacking in people, and now we're lacking in both. So it's been a hard journey these past 10 years.
Thank you. And next is Malcolm. Welcome.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Anna Marie. It's a joy to be here with my colleagues. And so I'll answer that second question first. I think teaching found me because my undergrad degree is in physics. And so I tried to get as far away from teaching and education as I could. I actually started working on my PhD in physics, doing solid state research, again, as I thought about it, way away from education. And lo and behold, I go and work with some students in an after-school program, and they hooked me. They got me. And so from there, I've taught every grade from 3-year-olds in summer camps to elementary age children. I was fortunate to teach and learn with middle schoolers, high schoolers, and even doctoral students. Some of the changes I've seen, I think I won't reiterate the ones that my colleagues and my fellow panelists have already mentioned, but I think technology has had a profound impact on education since I was in the classroom. We thought we were doing cutting edge research and using cutting edge technology when I was in the classroom. And wow, has it changed dramatically over the years. So a lot of the same things my colleagues mentioned, I would agree with those. And I would add technology to the equation in terms of both for the good in some cases and for the not so good in some other cases. So I'm looking forward to further conversation and dialogue about this important topic of how we keep our teachers in the classroom.
Thank you. It's like I said, it's a pleasure to have all of you here. My first question, I'm going to start with Leslie. You all can, chime in, if you have thoughts, but I'll go to each one of you and ask the same question. But if you want to add anything while we're doing this, we want it to be a discussion. So Leslie, what are the 2 or 3 biggest challenges that are facing teachers today? I mean, as of right now, and what are the teachers' fears?
So some of the big challenges for us in North Carolina are measures being taken by the state to change our licensure program. I feel my biggest fear on this is it's going to really drive so many of us out of the classroom because the merit pay system has been shown to not motivate students or teachers in the long run. And I, for one, have really questioned whether if this plan goes forward, if I will stick around for it. I don't teach an EOG subject, so my paycheck will be dependent upon observations and student surveys. And I worked for TIPS for a lot of years, and there's nothing worse than working your butt off and then getting a lousy tip at the end of a table because somebody didn't like something you did. So I can't fathom that this is going to do anything but continue the decline.
I'm going to follow up really quick. Do you feel like the officials are listening to teachers and their concerns? I feel like the plan just keeps moving ahead.
No.
How do you?
No, when you look at Leandro, and Ray certainly can piggyback on this with what the state said right before the election about Leandro, that the state has to fund it, and the General Assembly continues to thumb its nose at it. I mean, funding doesn't solve everything, but when you have lack of supplies and no textbooks in schools and falling down buildings, and you've got a resource of $1 billion, $6 billion, right? The state has that they can send some of that to the public schools to help solve some of these problems, and yet they refuse to do it. You've got to question what is going on.
Ray, I'll go to you as far as the challenges that teachers are facing, and if you want to piggyback off of what Leslie just said.
Sure. I would like to say it does not feel like the state legislature as a whole is. And the superintendent's office, the state superintendent's office is really listening to teachers about this. The merit plan was brought to some teacher groups. I think maybe at least 2 years ago in its infancy. There were the same problems we brought up today still haven't really been addressed. So it does not feel like they're really taking teacher considerations on some of these really career altering paths that they're pushing through. But I would say for myself, staffing is really the main issue I see right now. And it's not just teachers, it's, staffing the whole building, bus drivers, custodians. It's really difficult to fully staff, especially some of the larger high schools. And if anybody has children in CMS and you have a child that is still missing a teacher, and we're in mid-November, you feel the pain. I think the parents are really feeling the pain of these understaffed buildings. And that does really come down to pay and respect. The profession has really publicly not been respected for a while now. And the pay is just a reflection of that. So it's really hard to staff these buildings, and that brings down every subject that's being taught. If a student is missing one teacher, out of 4 or out of 6, it affects their entire day.
What do you think can be done?
I think there are several steps, and I do believe that the state mandating Leandro being funded is really a step in the right direction. I hope to see that really actually manifests money for our schools. But I think increasing pay, not just for teachers, but for support staff as well. When you have people in the building being paid $15 an hour, it's really unsustainable. People can't live in Charlotte very well on $15 an hour. And so fully staffing these buildings are going to make much safer, more nurturing environments, less stress, and the profession itself will attract more people.
Malcolm, what do you think are the biggest challenges teachers face, and how do you, I guess, teach students at UNC Charlotte to use their voice? I mean, the teachers they need paid more. They need the state to listen to them. They need officials to listen to them. How do you teach your students, the second part of the question, how do you give them that voice?
That's an excellent question. And it's just a follow-up to what Leslie and Ray shared. And I'll frame it this way too. I think two of the biggest challenges we have is how teachers handle these two situations. One is the academic learning loss. I mean, it is obvious that the pandemic had a deleterious effect on student learning. Now, our students learned some things, but they may not have necessarily been academic oriented. And so for many of our students, we're being challenged with dealing with how much ground can we cover, knowing that we were in a pandemic, and in some cases still are. How do we handle what students lost during this time? So I think that's a challenge inwardly for teachers. Outwardly, and this really resonates, I think, with what Leslie and Ray shared, and that is handling the public perception of teaching. How are teachers perceived? You know, when we first started the pandemic, or the pandemic started, teachers were seen as frontline workers. You know, everybody was on board with teachers. And for some reason, during those months, as the pandemic unfolded, teachers almost became enemy number one. As if something changed. The teachers were working, I think, even harder. And so what do we do in our teacher preparation program? We try to make sure that our teachers are around people like Leslie and Ray, who make sure they understand the joys of teaching. There's something magical about having a student learn. How do you do that in a classroom? We have amazing teacher leaders who help us to craft that kind of conversation and that kind of motivation for our incoming teachers, our teacher candidates. And then we also try to prepare our teachers to be advocates, to also be able to say when something doesn't sit right, when something is not in the best interest of children, how do you advocate for yourself and for your students? Now, that's a heavy lift. That's not something we're talking about that's easy to do. But Anna Maria, I don't think any of us would disagree that it's necessary. Is it hard? Absolutely. Is it necessary? Also, absolutely. And so it is a heavy lift for us as we work at UNC Charlotte and our Cato College of Education. And we can't do the work we're doing in terms of preparing the best teachers for our students without having a community effort that all of us are involved in this ecosystem that we call education. And we rely on our partners to help us to prepare the best educators we possibly can for our schools, our students, and our families.
Leslie and Ray, I'm going to ask you this question. What do you think happened during the pandemic where you guys were heroes, then all of a sudden it seems like the public perception did change? Why do you think that happened?
Well, I think we started to push back when they were trying to push kids back into schools. There was a big pushback from a lot of teachers, myself and Ray, because we were just concerned. We didn't know what we didn't know, right? There was no way of knowing how deadly and how bad it was going to be. And so we all kind of wanted to take a step back, and we all wanted to be in school trust. But a lot of us were like, we're not sure, why you wouldn't send me into a burning building without a fire extinguisher. So we need to know we have all systems in place and that it's a safe environment for staff and students. And I think that's where the perception started to change, because you started hearing rhetoric like teachers are lazy. They want to sit at home and teach out of their pajamas, and that was not the experience any of us were actually having. It was depressing to be at home and not being around our kids. But for safety of everybody, we had to kind of step up and advocate for that.
I think education is one of those political footballs. It's pretty easy to get people whipped up about education. I think because most of us have gone to school, or we have children in school. So I think a lot of us too romanticize or think we understand education because we were in school, when really our memories are those of students, not necessarily of educators. So I feel like people have a certain idea of what school is, what education was, and it's easy to make people feel like they understand education. It's easy to bring them into the conversation. But I think because of that, it's also easy to politicize. It's easy to use data, especially test scores, out of context for whatever political leaning you have. You can take data and use it. And I believe education has become that ground, that political ground, where people on all sides are using it to their will. And I think teachers have really been caught in the middle of that. I feel like we have been kind of used as pawns. And right now it feels like we are a local political pawn, even in our county. It feels like education, there's a constant battle over funding. It is used as a pawn in ways that maybe the healthcare industry isn't used, or housing isn't quite as emotional to people. And I really believe it's because most of us have a connection to education where we might not have a connection with healthcare.
Besides pay, what can stop the resignations and teachers leaving? Leslie, actually, I'm going to go to Ray, but Leslie, I just want to keep in mind, you said that you have thought about leaving the industry. And I'll repeat again, beside pay, how can we keep our teachers? How can we keep them in the classroom?
That's a really tough question. I think truly the support of our community, to feel like we are experts in our classroom, that we have the best interest of the children in front of us at heart. I feel like if I really truly felt that my community felt that about my profession, about me as a professional and as an educator, it would actually go a long way in making me respect my own decisions to stay in this field. Sometimes I question myself for staying, because it does feel like, you're kind of bullied. And so for me, I do believe the respect of the community would go a long way in keeping some of our staff in buildings.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that feeling valued is really important. Money is only going to get you so far. Lots of people leave six-figure jobs because they don't feel valued. I mean, when you look at what's going on Twitter right now, right? Leadership makes the difference between a successful organization and an unsuccessful one. And we can't even keep a leader in the seat long enough for any sort of long-term goals to be met. So I just feel like, and I have said to several school board members and central office staff that there's lots of ways to value your employees besides money. I mean, an employee of the month parking spot can go a long way, but also doing the little things that make us feel appreciated on a regular basis, not just on Teacher Appreciation Week, but we got to show up and every once in a while just get an attaboy from not just the kids and the community, but from our administration as well.
Malcolm, how do we stop the resignations?
Well, I think Ray and Leslie captured it. And I would say this way, and if you recall, one of my challenges I mentioned was, how do teachers handle the public perception? So if the teachers are having to handle a public perception, the public can help to make sure that teachers feel valued. And that's a part of the equation. And so I frame it as, we have to show teachers some love. We have to show them that they are loved, they're cared for, they're respected. All of the things that Leslie and Ray just described will pay major dividends and can. And we have many examples of that happening around this country, where leaders, where school board members, where others have shown teachers that they are valued. And that can go a very long way. You know, we talk about external and internal motivation. Well, yeah, we're motivated to be educators because there is some reason about making a difference in the lives of children, doing things where you may not see the positive outcome tomorrow, but you're playing the long game. There's also some external motivation here as well. And I think the more that we see teaching as a public profession, which is what we do, also seen as being valued by the public, those are the things that will go a long way in helping us to make sure that teachers feel valued. And if we feel valued, it could add to the equation of us staying in the classroom and being very, very effective when we're thinking about what we do with children and families every day in our community. So I think that's a big part of the equation. Dare I say, making sure that teachers feel valued and loved for what they do.
How do you have an example of something that around the country that the community is doing to make teachers feel valued? A district?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
That's okay. So I do have an example that I recently shared with someone. I have to give a shout out to my son's elementary school principal, who since passed away. He was at a school in Georgia, and his principal did something called "When you miss school, you miss out." And so he would have assemblies almost every week. Maybe it was bi-weekly. It's been a few years now, but this is an elementary school. And he would have these assembly in the school. And the only way you could get one of the prizes is you had to be present, because he wanted to increase his attendance. He wanted everybody to be there. And so these prizes were for the students. He gave away bicycles. He got community partners to donate bicycles with helmets. He also had car washes for the teachers. He had oil changes. He had cakes, and you had to be there to get these things because you didn't want to miss school. And so his message was, when you won a prize and you weren't there, everybody in the gym or the cafeteria yelled, "When you miss school, you miss out." That's what we have to tell Mr. Butler. He missed school, so he missed out. He increased attendance dramatically. And let me tell you, because those teachers were there, because the students were there, because the cafeteria workers were there, because the groundskeepers were there, it had a phenomenal impact on student achievement. To the point that even the parents would show up for the assemblies because we wanted to see how excited everybody was. And in fact, my son was sick one time and said, "Dad, I need to go to school." I said, "Son, you can't go to school." He said, "But Mr. Mansley said when you miss school, you miss out. And I don't want to miss out." So they created an environment at the school. So it wasn't just you wanted to be there. You wanted to be there for a reason. That learning was happening, that I dare say loving was happening. And so because he was able to get that climate in the school, of course, he was pulled away to teach to be a principal at another school. As Leslie said, those kinds of great leaders, he got pulled to another school to do the same kinds of things. But it was creating that kind of culture environment where people feel valued in that building. Everybody felt like they had a reason to be there, and they had the same cause in place, and that was to make sure those students felt loved, valued, and they were learning.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yes.
I'd like to say that the idea of building culture, I do believe, starts with longevity and leadership. And I feel like one thing that has hurt CMS is constantly shaking up leadership within school buildings and within the district. It's a shuffle every year. And really valuing keeping an administrator in a position for a good long while. I know my son's in a high school where the principal has been there for a very long time. And it's a different kind of community and a different kind of feel when you have administration that really takes ownership and makes a home in a building. And I feel like if CMS could really incentivize having leadership in one place for a good amount of time, it could really help with the culture of each building.
We're going to go to school safety just to touch on it a little bit. Obviously in the climate that we're in now, and you talk about environment, safety is an issue. Malcolm, what safety concerns exist for teachers, and how can we improve that?
I see the safety issue in two veins. One is the physical safety. You mentioned at the very top talking about gun violence, and dare I say it's even happening at universities, unfortunately, with the situation that just occurred at University of Virginia up in Charlottesville. And so I don't think any community is immune from that issue. And so the physical safety, do you feel safe going into the building? And then the psychological safety, does it feel like a good place to be? Do you feel like when you walk in the building, and notice when I say you, I'm talking about the students, the staff, everyone, does it feel like a place where learning can happen, that you can do your job and you're feeling valued? And so if we start with the physical safety, I'm all for school resource officers. I know a few of them, they do amazing work. I think we also talk about what other resources can we have in a building that goes beyond having a school resource officer that will also make us feel safe. That may be something like a psychologist or counseling services. That may be the social worker that works with children and families. And when I say psychologist or counselor, I'm also talking about for the teachers as well. So it's not just services that we're providing for the students. We're also talking about services that teachers need too, because if the pandemic has shown us anything, is that teachers have spent a lot of time trying to meet the needs of children and their families, and not as much for themselves. And so I think another opportunity for us as we think about safety of schools is to think about what can we do more to support the educators, the principals who have spent many nights on the campus, making sure people are safe, making sure children have meals and a safe place to go home, catching the bus when it doesn't come on time, and having to transport children home. All of those things that people do above and beyond. How do you make sure that they're supported as well? So definitely the physical safety of the building, and I would defer to experts who have a better sense of that. I would also say the psychological safety, and do people feel like school is a good place to be? And I think we have lots of opportunities, as we said earlier, to talk about the culture and climate of a school that also contributes to the safety of the school as well.
Leslie?
So we got the middle schools got the scanners this school year, and that I feel like I don't want to curse it, but I feel like the gun incidents have definitely tampered down from last year. I think they give us a really false sense of security because they're on for arrival and then they're shut down. We don't have staffing to be able to monitor those scanners throughout the day. So if a kid comes in 15 minutes late, they're not getting scanned. That's our reality. Okay. So again, it's a panacea. I'm glad they're there because I think it's one layer of protection, but of course we got to be vigilant to build off what Malcolm said, the psychological safety. Now, I was a victim of school violence as a teacher several years ago, and the trauma it created in my brain has kind of got me on a hair trigger. It's kind of calmed down over the years, but constantly looking out for something to go wrong. But when you're looking at your own school community, we're fortunate enough to have 3 grade level counselors and a school psychologist on campus, but we're also one of the biggest middle schools in the district. So it still is not adequate, right? We need to have a safe space for kids who are dealing with stuff that is beyond the capability of a teacher. I am not a trained psychologist. I know what I know. I know how to deal with some things you can see when a kid is struggling, but there needs to be a space and a person to help them manage their emotions outside of the classroom and then come back in. But we're spread so thin, as Ray said, we're short-staffed in buildings. Who's going to do that? So instead, that child winds up staying in the classroom oftentimes and creating a learning disruption for other children. So I don't know what the solution is, except that putting somebody in there, or creating that sort of situation for schools. Some schools do have something like that, but not all of us do.
Yeah, I would say, this is not an easy task, but I do believe safety starts with relationships. We get to know our students when we have, less than 150 students that we manage in a day. So I believe that is a really important part of safety, is teachers, TAs, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, front office staff, CSAs, knowing who the students are, knowing their families, having relationships where the students trust at least one adult in the building. And that is very hard to accomplish with the class sizes that we have right now. And I believe that having more people in the buildings, having smaller class sizes, you are going to have much less incidents of violence in the classrooms because students know what's going on. And the difference between something happening and not happening is often a student talking to a trusted adult. If adults don't have the time and space to make those relationships, then we're really missing a key part of safety. So I believe that it's a long-term solution, but having staff in those buildings so that every student in a building has at least one trusted adult would really help with incidents of violence.
Malcolm, I'm going to pick on you again. We've heard that the teacher pipeline, students being interested in the field of education is waned a little bit. Can you talk about that, particularly at your school? And how do you make this field attractive? We're going to start with that. How do you make it attractive to get more students who are going to college to want to be teachers? I mean, I know growing up, that was what all of us wanted to do. We wanted to be a teacher. I did, and then shifted to this.
You get summers off.
How do you get more people interested in the field?
That's a great question, and I think part of it is acknowledging why is it challenging to get people in the profession in the first place, and then try to address some of those issues up front. So we started with, you said, let's take money off the table because we know money is always on the table. So that's on the table even for new students, for new teachers, for prospective teachers. So if we have a very bright young person and that person has a multiplicity of career options, when you look at teaching, now you say, okay, if you're going to teaching, you have to pay to get a license. You're going to have to pay for this. You're going to have to pay for this. And another profession says, well, actually, we're going to give you money for those things. You're not going to, if you get that, we're going to pay you more. So I think that's part of the equation at the very beginning. We have to make sure that we see teaching as not only an honorable profession, that people can have a living wage. And again, we talked about that before already. Now, how do we make teaching even more attractive? I think that starts very early. And I'll give an example with what we call the Charlotte Teacher Early College. It is a partnership with CMS. And so we have this program on our university where students can start at it in 9th grade. And they are actually getting their AA degree and their high school diploma. So they're finishing that program with at least 60 credit hours of college and also getting their high school diploma. Well, here is a captive audience of about 55 students right now who are already saying, you know what, I really would like to be a teacher. What we have to do is once they vest that interest in it, how do we keep them? And so now that's what we're working on. Can we figure out a way to now say, if you got your AA for free, here's an opportunity to get your bachelor's for free. And so here's 2 more years of teaching, of education. And if you finish with your bachelor's degree and you get licensed to teach, we're actually going to have a job waiting for you in CMS if you get licensed and you commit to teaching for us for 3 years. Now, again, we've already taken care of the money side. So now here's a captive audience. And when you get in the classroom, we have a program called the North Carolina New Teacher Support Program, where we provide new teacher support for beginning teachers. And so not only are we going to make sure that you get your teaching paid, your education paid for, we're now going to provide you with the support you need to stay in the profession and be a successful teacher. I think if we start to promote the kinds of things that we know are good for the profession, and those are some examples, and I'm sure Leslie and Ray have more, those are the things that make teaching attractive. As I said, teaching found me. I wasn't looking to become a teacher, but when I started working with young people and I became fascinated with the idea that I could help someone learn something that they didn't know before, and I could learn from them, I was hooked. Now we have to have all those other things in place, like salary, like a culture that supports them, like increasing the public perception of teaching so that when folks say they want to become a teacher, someone not saying, no, you don't want to do that. You're actually saying, that's great, you want to do that. And there was a time when that was the case. You mentioned it, Anna Maria. There was a time when that was the case. I think there's an opportunity for us to be able to do more of that. We are earnestly recruiting every day. We just hired a brand new education recruiter, and she just started a couple of days ago. And we're in that same mode of making sure folks see that education and teaching is a great profession as an option for all the other professional options that are out there for young people.
You can't make me. When I was a kid, I loved Laura Ingalls Wilder. I loved the Little House books. Remember, she was a teacher. The social contract that used to exist between the community and the schoolhouse was that they didn't get paid a lot up front, but they got taken care of. And they keep chipping away at the part that's taking care of us, right? So there's no more master's pay in the state of North Carolina. There's certainly, they got rid of the teaching fellows. And then now you don't get retirement benefits or health insurance if you come on as a new teacher now. They've got to reinstate the idea that you've got to take care of your teachers. And again, it's not always just a financial, it's the community piece of surrounding your schoolhouse and making sure the people that educate your kid have affordable housing, can pay their bills, don't have to work 2 jobs, et cetera, et cetera. That's what we need to return to.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that I came on before a lot of the chipping away happened of master's pay, longevity, healthcare benefits after retirement. And I will say those are some key points keeping me here in this profession. If I were 24 and had a rough year and wasn't thinking, well, I'll be taken care of, in my 60s and 70s and 80s, it would be a harder sell. This profession would be a much harder sell. So the state has really chipped away at the safety net for retirees. Cost of living is not increasing for retirees. And we know with inflation that's devastating for our educator retirees. So that is, I think, a key point. We aren't, we're not trying to live high on the hog. We are really just trying to stay healthy and active and be able to afford housing into our older age. And North Carolina did a good job of that until recently. And that really is, I think, driving away young people and making it so that they don't really see the value in sticking in it long term.
What keeps you, and Leslie, what keeps you in this business?
The kids, like all the stuff that goes on out here, right? Oh, it makes you insane. The minute those kids step across your threshold and you shut the door and you start teaching, you're like, oh, it's like my little piece of heaven. Sometimes they drive you nuts, right? But that's part and parcel of it all. At the end of the day, it's the kids that keep me going every day. That's enough said.
And I would say here. I mean, it's the kids. I still I won't name names right now, but folks who know me, I just start calling off the names of students who not only I had an opportunity to, I'd like to think, influence them, they influenced me. And for all the things, as Leslie said, for all the things that are going on, as I started with, when you look internally, there's something about teaching that's pretty magical. And when it happens with young people and when they come back and say, you remember me? And you're standing there saying, I don't remember you, but then they start telling you all about what happened. There's literally no amount of money that can replace that. And for anybody who's ever experienced it, I think they would agree. There's something magical about what happens in the classroom when students get it and when teachers enjoy what they're doing. And that to me is the joy of teaching and why anybody would stay in the profession as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's having those, a bad day and the kids come in and they make it better. They really are the heart and soul. I just started recently, have had a couple of my students become teachers, and that really has kept me going as well. Just thinking that at least they had a good enough experience to want to do this with their lives. And that gives me hope. That gives me a lot of hope. New teachers keep me excited. Meeting new people that are gung-ho and going into this, and also seeing the value and joy in education, even with, outside pressures, they're still coming. And it really is, the school building itself is a really lovely place to be. I know I have hope that our state will come to its senses and really, with Leandro, start to fund and prioritize education again. And we can get back to some really fantastic learning environments.
So this is for all of you. We touched on it a little bit, but right now, what kind of support can the Charlotte Mecklenburg community give you as educators, and what kinds of alliances can be forged to make this job better?
So I'll start, and I know Leslie and Ray can give lots more details about this kind of thing, but I think it's a community effort. I think schools have to be seen as a part of the community. They have to be seen as, if the school is doing well, a community is going to thrive. And so what does that mean for me? What kind of support can a community give teachers? I would say literally anything that is needed to help students and families be successful. And it is truly a community effort. When I think about the work we do here in the Cato College of Education, there's nothing we could do to prepare the best and brightest educators for schools, whether those are classroom teachers, counselors who are also in our college, whether that's educational leaders, learning design, technology, all of that is a group effort. There's nothing singular about it. And so I think it's important, as I think about my background as a scientist, is rather than seeing education as an ecosystem and we're working on it, I think it's really important for schools and for all of us to see schools as a part of the ecosystem, that we are a part of it. And that if one part of it is not doing well, it's not working as optimal. And so how do we do that? That means that all of us have a part in what happens in schools. And part of that, being a part of it, is making sure teachers have what they need, and then literally getting out of their way and let them do the job that they've been paid and they've been called to do. And I think the community, all of us, have a part to play in that. And for me, the better working environment is, again, knowing that school is a great place to be, and community partners, businesses, all of those have a place and a part to say in what that looks like for all of our children, their families, those who are struggling and have challenges, those who are very successful. All of them are part of that same community. And if we see the school as a part of the community, I think we'll be more inclined to see what it is we can do and make sure that teachers have what they need, principals have what they need, TAs have what they need, custodians have what they need, cafeteria, everybody has what they need, and then get out of their way and let them do the amazing job. Hold us accountable, and yet make sure we have what it needs to be successful. And we feel like the community is behind us, that when they drop their children off at that school or they hop off the bus, they know they're in the hands of some amazing people who are going to make sure they're loved, and they're going to love them enough to teach them something as well. That's what my perspective is, sitting here, knowing how long I've been working with community partners and seeing the effect of everybody being on board and what that means for our young people, and seeing those eyes light up when they hop off the bus and you say, "Did you have a good day today?" And they say yes, and they can list off all those things that happened that day.
I think that changing our mindsets when it comes to any of the conversations that we're having across our community, to remember that people have generally good intentions when it comes to education, at least within the community, right? So we got to stop treating each other like enemies. We got to stop the vitriol and the screaming and hollering at school board meetings that it doesn't get us anywhere. It does not move the conversation forward at all. You got to understand that people like Ray and I show up to our jobs every day because we have the best of intentions. And there's a lot of intricacy and intention that goes into our work. And you do, as Malcolm said, have to trust the professionals to do our jobs.
For me, this is a very large ask of our community, but schools really cannot be the last social safety net. if I were to ask this community to do something for schools, it would be to think about what fell through the cracks during the pandemic when those buildings weren't open. And it was food, it was housing, it was mental health, it was health care. And that's because our community really relies on our schools to take care of basic needs for the children in our community. And that's just not right. It's not good enough. It should not be that schools are, the only people thinking about whether this child is getting, the only people besides the family, that this child is getting fed or sleeping or has a roof over their heads. Our community really needs to do better by the whole family unit, not just the teachers in the buildings, but for the families and for the kids in the community. We have so many homeless students. We have so many students that don't have meals outside of school. We have so many families that don't have health care, health coverage, mental health services. Our community really needs to take a hard look at why the schools are the last social safety net. We need to deal with housing, food, healthcare. And I know that that is not just a local concern, it's a state and federal concern. But we really need to stop thinking about schools as nurses' offices, mental health offices, food, nutrition, and housing for our students. It really should be a place where we can educate, and we can only do that when the actual needs of our students are being met on a daily basis. So I would ask that our community really takes a hard look at itself and tries to do better by all of the folks in our community.
Right. Thank you. Your responses were amazing. I'm going to toss it back to Lisa, who has a few questions from the audience who's been listening along with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. And yes, so of course, this is a community conversation, and a lot of people have submitted questions and stuff. So I'm going to just pull them here. I think I'm also going to put them in the chat so you guys can also read them, because some of them are a little long. I'm also going to read them to you. So this one came in earlier. So how do you feel schools can facilitate meaningful teacher-parent communication? How can the board and staff best gather information about what teachers need to be successful with their students, and barriers at their school? I think that's a pretty good question. Would anybody who would like to jump into there? I can go to.
Yeah, I'll jump right in. You need time. I mean, it's really hard. I have the time because I'm the only one that teaches my subject, so I don't have to go to meetings with other teachers who teach my subject for planning. So I use a lot of that time for that parent communication piece. But not everybody has the luxury of that time, especially when you're shorthanded in buildings and you're having to cover other classes, which happens quite often. So that is then pushed out to either the beginning of your day or the end of the day when you're mentally exhausted or trying to gear up or get your copies done or whatever. So we just need time for it. And then if you want to know what we need, just ask us. I mean, the best thing when you get a communication from a parent, what do you need? And you say, you know what, I'm out of tissues. And the next day you get a box of tissues sent in from the student. It's like, oh, I feel so validated and heard because I didn't have to go spend $1.79 on my own wallet so that your child can blow their nose in my classroom. It seems so simple, but communication is a two-way street, right? And you can't hear us if you're not asking us what we need to say.
Right. Any thoughts, Malcolm?
Yeah, I'll just add one piece. I think it speaks to what Leslie said, and that is the public. Sometimes people think that if a teacher is not in front of the classroom or interacting with students, that they're not teaching. And there's so much else that a teacher has to do in a day, as Leslie was describing. At the end of the day, I'm trying to communicate with parents. I have planning time, and sometimes the planning time I'm having to cover other classes, or I'm having to do other things. And so I think part of it is if I'm not in front of the classroom, if I'm not with my students, the trust has to be that I'm also contributing to the success of my student. And it may be in a case where I'm not in front of the students with them and interacting with them one-on-one, small group, whatever. So I think that's part of the conversation too, is making sure that teachers have the time to do all of the other things they need to do to ensure student success. Communicating with families. That's a part of student success. Going and talking with someone else who's a partner teacher, talking with the social worker, talking with the school counselor. All of those things are part of a teacher's day. And sometimes those things happen in 2-minute hallway conversations and 5 minutes running out the door to get in the car to go take their own children to soccer practice or go get something to eat. Time to do those things. If there was dedicated time to do those things, again, we know students will be more successful and families will be more supported. Teachers have to have time, and that time has to be acknowledged as a part of their day when they're having to make those phone calls, when they're having to send emails. As Leslie said, that's considered a part of the teacher's job. And if it is a part of the job, where is that built into the day of the teacher, that it doesn't have to occur outside of the time when they're already in the school building?
And I know it's a particular, we don't have an elementary school teacher here, but I know it's a particular concern for our elementary school teachers who are face-to-face with students, like the same group of students throughout their day until they go to their specialist classes. Whereas in the high school and middle school setting, we have rotating classes. So there are those little snippets of time that we can carve out. But I do know from hearing last year, a lot of their time is just eaten away.
Also, support staff. I'm thinking about at my building, when I don't have time to reach out to parents, I have a community liaison person at my building. Also, I am not bilingual, and he is, and he can make contacts with families. It's his whole job is to work as a facilitator between the school and home. That position has been wonderfully valuable to our school building. Also, the school psychologist is right across the hall from me. I'm so very lucky that my school has a full-time psychologist, and she's so close. And, the other day I just popped in and asked how a student I know that had surgery was doing. And she had been in contact with the hospital. Like, having support staff there that can bridge the teachers and the homes is really helpful if you don't have the time carved out in your day as a teacher to be able to make those contacts yourself. Having support staff that is integral to making the home and school connections. So I'm very glad that we've had that community liaison in our school. And I know some of those have been, I think, funded through COVID relief funds. And I hope that the district decides that these support positions are integral to the school and to the community and keeps them in place in the future.
I just wanted to say, jump on something that you said, Ray, about that you're not a bilingual instructor. And that was one of the questions that came up from the community. I'm just going to throw it in the chat, but I'm going to cut to the chase. Basically, is there more bilingual personnel, in the school district? As you know, Mecklenburg has Hispanics and Latinos are among the largest growing ethnic groups in Mecklenburg County and such. So what kind of resources are there for the
I can speak for we have an amazing, it's now called ML. We have 2 ML teachers, but I can tell you in my community, there is a daily influx of students from Ukraine. Like we had to physically move our bilingual teacher's classroom because she went from like 12 students to 20 in a matter of 2 weeks, and she couldn't physically fit the kids in the room anymore. And it continues to grow. So it's not just about Spanish speaking. We're dealing, like in my school in particular, we have so many languages being spoken within the classroom setting that it's amazing. Now, one of the things that I think that CMS has done very well by its teachers, myself included, was the training for teachers on how to teach bilingual kids in the classroom. So as long as we keep that support up and keep giving teachers what they need in order to reach and teach students who come from a variety of backgrounds, And it's not just about the language acquisition as well. They're coming with a lot of trauma. That we just got to keep those supports really at the top of our mind.
And to the point of the question, what efforts are made to keep Spanish and bilingual teachers? I think, I mean, honestly, we have to have supports in place that are not the teachers. We need those community liaisons. We need strong translator services, and CMS, I know, is working on this so that the burden isn't put on a teacher that just happens to speak another language, because I know that it is a heavy burden, and they are often leaned on heavily for translation in the past. But I do know that those support positions, if we can just keep building those support positions so that we have the translator services and we have the liaisons and the multilingual support staff, that would really help to keep our bilingual teachers in the classroom teaching where they're really most valuable.
Go ahead, Malcolm. I was going to ask what's being done at the college level to prepare them academically.
So we have a thriving program for teacher certification in multiple languages. And so that's a part of the work that we have people who come to us with speaking multiple languages, and they can get certified and licensed to teach those languages through our university. So we offer that. We also have a lot of our faculty members who are engaged again with the community. And so, for example, we were just at an event a few weeks ago where we work closely with an organization that works with immigrant populations. And those immigrants speak many languages in this after school program. Well, some of our faculty actually work and are on the board. One of our faculty members is on the board, and she works very closely with this organization, not only for interpreting, also for providing and figuring out and identifying resources for the families. Because we know, as we talked about earlier, it's kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have to meet those students and their families' needs at the very beginning: food, clothing, shelter, before we can actually talk about the learning and all the other things, all the way up to actualization when it comes to Maslow's thinking. But we have to have those resources in the community as well, because there's no one-stop shopping for getting all of the resources. And as Leslie described, when you have other languages coming in and people coming from all over the world, that can't just be the school that's providing the resources and doing that. That truly does take a community. I mean, we're having schools that change overnight. Over the summer, they're having to put trailers on the campus because they have an influx of students. And typically those students are speaking multiple languages. So what do you do for those teachers who don't speak those languages? You're going to have to identify other ways to support them. I think we're agile enough and we have enough community support that we can make those things happen on behalf of the children and their families who come to us every day.
I think we lost Ray. I'm not sure. I do have another question that's kind of directed to CMS faculty in particular. There's a question that came: what's the panel's position on longer school days? That's something I know that's been discussed. Like, you know, maybe they should have longer school days. Maybe they should go into the summer. You know, what we did lose Ray. Okay. What are your thoughts on that, Leslie?
We already have a longer school day. We already have a longer school day than the state requires, right? So we have more seat time. Now, I've also heard from elementary school teachers in some of my advocacy work that it doesn't work for our elementary school kids at all. It's tough on them to be expected to sit still in classrooms for that stretch of a day, right? But because of busing situations and the amount of money that goes into transporting our students, they cannot have a different school time for our younger kids, right? So I don't think a longer school day, I think we actually have gone the wrong way. There's not enough playtime built into our school days. Our kids are being forced to take tests at very early ages, and no amount of seat time is going to change outcomes if you don't let kids be kids, because learning is happening at multiple points of their day if they're allowed to play, use their imagination, go to art class, go to PE, right? It can't always be about the test. So I don't think seat time or extended school days is going to do anything but add more to our kids' plates. So many of our kids have so much to do when they get out of school. So now if they're not getting out of school till 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and then they have to go right to tennis practice, or they have to go right to soccer or whatever it is, or what their after school program, When are they going
And
to
they're
get
starting
kids?
at like 7 in the
Yeah.
morning, the high
When
school
do they get
kids
to
in
be
particular.
kids?
Yeah, yeah. Any
Leslie,
thoughts on that, Ray? I guess, or Malcolm, go ahead.
I just want to say, Leslie, you said the best thing at the end is when do they get a chance to be children? When do they get a chance to be kids? Recess helps them to get the wigglies out. You know, they get a chance to play. They get a chance to form relationships. They get a chance to do some mediation. You know, if they're on the plate, all of those things contribute to a successful human being. And so while we are having this focus on academics and the testing, and that drives a lot of the conversation, I think it's important for us to press pause and say, okay, so is this in the best interest of children? And sometimes the best interest is unstructured time, that they get a chance to literally be children. And I think the more we think about what's in the best interest of the children, the longer day is not a panacea. It's not going to, if we have a longer day. So what are you going to do with the longer day? If it's only what, as Leslie alluded, if you only extended the day to focus more on academics and not giving them a chance to be children, really the longer day is not going to help anybody.
Right.
And so I think we have to be careful when we talk about, for example, the longer day. It's not going to solve the problem if you extend the day and you're not doing things that help children to become more well-rounded, become good citizens. And part of that is doing things that are not tied specifically to something that we would consider to be tested, to go to music, to go to things like that. I remember my son's high school principal said, he told all of the parents, he said, make sure your child does something extracurricular. And they provided the busing after school. They did things before the school day. But he said, doing something that does not tie you to the school gives you a chance to maybe see a teacher in a different setting. That teacher may be sponsoring a club. It's going to give you a chance to maybe interact with students and peers that are not in your classroom. Again, it's going to help you to mediate and possibly deal with differences. His mentality was that if students were doing things that were not fit within the traditional school day, that were extracurricular, that it was going to help those students become better citizens. And I can say for many of those children, we saw that play out when we saw and went to a jazz concert. We went to all these other events. We saw those children blossoming, and that fed into what they were able to do when they were in the classroom as well. So I think the longer day has its place. We just have to think about, if it's going to be a longer day, what's going to happen in a longer day, and not see the longer day as this thing that's going to cure the ills. Maybe it's something else we can be doing that doesn't require us to extend the day of the school or even go into the summer.
Do you have any thoughts, Ray? What if that's something that should be do? I don't know if that's a great, from what I'm hearing, the panel seems to think it's not a good idea.
That's a hard sell. Just thinking about, my day is 8 hours minimum, often without a single minute break from children. So tacking on more time is really actually pretty physically unsustainable as a person in the world, but also unsustainable for the children. I know my own children, when they get home, they are done. They are tapped out. They are tired. So I think that extending just a regular school day is a hard sell. And I also know we had a hard time getting students in for summer school the past few years because summer school really honestly was still about instruction, data, and some of the love of learning really was missing. And it's sad, but I think as adults, we are very concerned about, reading, instruction, math, and these are all very important things. But like Leslie said, we're not gonna get kids to want to learn unless we have that unstructured time, the play time, the time for really learning who you are as a person, how to manage conflict, how to just be a person in the world. These kids are really, from start to finish in the day, their day is structured, and extending that, I think, would be detrimental unless it was done in a way where it was a little bit more unstructured, or focusing, like Malcolm said, on things like music or art or sports. but yeah, just extending the day to have more time to try to learn to read, try to do that math, I think would be very difficult for both the children and the adults.
That's great. That's great. Here's a question just for Malcolm. I think so. One of the readers sent in a question: how do we more effectively recruit a diverse group of teachers? So, since you're in the business of educating the teachers, what are ways that we can recruit more diverse groups of teachers? Malcolm.
That's a great question, and I think part of the equation is very similar to how we recruit teachers in general, and that is, how do we make teaching attractive to anyone? Now, when it comes to diverse populations, I mean, I use myself as an example. Well, if I'm a high achieving student of color, I will have a lot of options available to me, a lot of different options available to me. So how do you convince me that of all the options in front of me, that I should choose to be a classroom teacher? I should have an impact on the future of society and of the world and all of those things. That's the same thing that we sell to anybody who wants to become a teacher. I think focusing on increasing the diversity of the classroom, because we know that makes a difference in the lives of children when they see someone who might look like them, think like them, talk like them, have lived experiences like them. Those things make a difference. And so I think that's part of the sale. Also, not a but, and if we think about the work of someone like Gloria Ladson-Billings, who wrote the book called The Dream Keepers many years ago, and she talked about effective teachers of diverse students. And in that book, she had teachers from all walks of life who were having a phenomenal impact on the lives of children from diverse backgrounds. And so I think in the midst of trying to also diversify the teacher workforce, which is something we should be doing, we can also work on making sure that whoever's in the classroom with our children, if they're Black and brown children, who is in front of those children, who's working with them, and making sure they understand the population with whom they're working. And that includes Black and brown teachers as well, because we might bring some experiences to the table that will help the students. We might also have some opportunities to get better at the craft as well and how to relate to students. And so I think when we talk about recruiting teachers, Lisa, it's important for us to think about what does that mean for all of the teachers that are working with our students? And I think it's a both and. Can we diversify the teacher workforce? Yes, we can. And how do we do that? By making sure that we show teaching as a lifelong profession. You have this opportunity to potentially change to project the trajectory of people's lives, of children's lives and families, to break vicious cycles. And we have teachers who are in those settings and came from those same experiences, and making sure that the teachers are in our classrooms already, and anybody who's going to work with children understand that they have that same opportunity to potentially change the lives of students. For those 7 hours, those 8 hours, you have that kind of opportunity. So I think that's the sale for recruiting a more diverse teacher workforce. And it's also an opportunity for us to increase the number of people who are in the classrooms with our students every day.
I agree with that. Thank you. I think we have time for just one more question. I was going to direct this, I believe, to Leslie, and we'll wrap it up. And it's just it's from a reader. So are teachers allowed to be creative in their teaching in the classroom? That's kind of a hot button topic. I mean, I guess Ray can also chime in and we could wrap it up, but because teachers are being challenged on these topics, especially in social studies and math and science, especially during the pandemic. It's just,
So I am a social studies teacher, but I'm an elective. So I, am a very creative teacher. I don't have, in my global studies class, I really have free reign in that class, which is phenomenal. But I'm mindful because I don't want to introduce something that's going to have, blowback on me. So you got to be very you have to be very intentional with how you teach. It's also very daunting when you are like, oh, go ahead, just figure out what you're going to teach without having sort of any guidelines, any guardrails there, right? So I teach world history in the middle school level. I teach a high school world history course, which is the district has created my curriculum, whatever. But this is the part I remember Dr. Hayes, our deputy superintendent, saying, you know, what they give us is the skeleton, and it's my job to flesh it out, right? It's my job to add the meat to the bones of that skeleton to make it come to life for the kids, right? Still teaching the standards, still doing what I'm supposed to be doing in terms of my pacing, etc. Right? So, I mean, it's part of the reason I do what I do is I'm a ham and I love to get up and like, you know, be a goofball in front of my kids, and they love it. I mean, they love it. They react to how you love what you teach. Now, I said, I'm very fortunate in that I don't have the restrictions of teaching math or ELA, which is way more prescriptive. I feel that some of the way that the curriculum chosen by CMS is teaching reading to our kids is kind of making them lose their love of reading. I hate that, because I love to read. And I hate to see a kid struggle with reading because it's become a chore. But again, I'm not an ELA teacher, so I really can't, criticize it too much. I just hate to see a kid just be like, oh, we're still reading this book a month later. Like, but they go to the media center and they have other things because their teachers do what they need to do for them as well. So, yeah, I don't think you have too many people in the classroom who aren't creative brained people. Not only do we how to make treasure out of trash, right? Because we will pick up anything that somebody else is discarding and turn it into something we can use in our classroom. But we can take even the most boring and bland subject matter and bring it to life for kids. So,
Well, the students at the Charlotte Mecklenburg School are really lucky to have you there to help them stuff. And we really appreciate all the panelists' time coming tonight. Thank you again, Dr. Malcolm Butler, and thank you, Leslie Nelson and Ray Legrand. And on behalf of all of us at the Charlotte Observer, we thank everyone for tuning in tonight for this very important discussion, for participating, for the questions that you submitted in. And we thank you all for your commitment for educating our community's young people. Thank you very much. And this recording will be available online, if you'd like to see it again. On behalf of the staff, good night and thank you.